Welcome, viewers. Welcome to this very special program called Envoy Speaks. In this program, we focus on India's world engagement and interactions with heads of Indian missions, and it details the government policies governing its political, economic, commercial, tourism, and cultural diplomacy efforts in promoting bilateral, trilateral, and multilateral ties with prominent nations of the world. In today's program, we are joined by a very special guest, His Excellency Gopal Baglay, the Indian High Commissioner to Sri Lanka. Before we start chatting with him, a brief profile. His Excellency Gopal Baglay holds Masters in Chemistry from Lucknow University. He is married to Miss Beena. He is an Indian Foreign Service officer of the 92 batch, having distinguished career spanning nearly 3 decades. He has served in various capacities. To mention a few, was Joint Secretary in the Prime Minister's Office, official spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs, Joint Secretary, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran Division. It is important to mention that in his capacity as Joint Secretary State, he was tasked with creation of a separate department in the Ministry of External Affairs to facilitate international outreach of Indian states. His Excellency Gopal Baglay speaks Hindi, Urdu, Sanskrit, English, Ukrainian, Russian, and Nepalese languages. It's my honor and pleasure to welcome His Excellency Gopal Baglay, the Indian High Commissioner to Sri Lanka. So welcome, Your Excellency.
Good morning and very warm namaste to you, Ame, and also to your viewers.
I'll start with my first question. You have almost completed 1 year as Indian High Commissioner. How has been your experience, and has COVID-19 had a significant impact on international relations and diplomacy? And what measures have you been taken on the bilateral front to deal with these challenges posed by COVID-19?
Well, you are very right, Ame. I arrived in Colombo in rather unusual circumstances. Last year, when I came on the 8th of May, it was just 1 day after the Vesak Day, which is obviously, we know the significance. It's commemorates the birth of Siddharth Gautam, and the whole week is considered very auspicious in Sri Lanka. But I came amidst the raging pandemic, the first wave of corona. And I came on a special Indian Air Force aircraft, which carried with it 12.5 tons of medicine supplies for Sri Lanka as a gift from the people and government of India. So my arrival signified the importance which India attached to its relations with Sri Lanka, which are age-old. But it also reflected the earnestness of cooperation between India and Sri Lanka as close neighbors in tackling challenges, global challenges like COVID-19. And since the time of my arrival, I have been very fortunate to receive a very warm welcome wherever I have been in Sri Lanka. At the highest level, there is political will to make the relationship between India and Sri Lanka even stronger. There has been very forthcoming and warm cooperation from every layer and department of the government authorities in Sri Lanka, whether it is in Colombo or whether it is in the provinces. And I must say that, as you would know, the challenges of COVID-19 have in a way greatly hampered our normal life as we know it. So conduct of international relations and diplomacy is no exception. In fact, at the root of conduct of diplomatic policy and international affairs lies interaction, lies conversation, lies talking to each other and addressing issues, taking decisions and implementing them. All of this has been impacted globally. So it is also the India-Sri Lanka relations which have got impacted to that extent that the interaction could not be what it was. in a normal year, let's say the year preceding that. You would know that the president of Sri Lanka, His Excellency Gotabaya Rajapaksa, visited India in November 2019 as his first first state visit after assuming office. And that was in the same month that he had assumed office. Then the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa, also visited India last year in February. So the stage was set for a very quick takeoff of the relationship in the new areas which the leadership of both countries had identified. Unfortunately, COVID-19 is spread globally. But India and Sri Lanka, given the strong political will on both sides to strengthen the relationship, given the strong leadership commitment and guidance, we have risen together to cooperate, to convert the challenge into opportunity. And that has been the mantra in the India-Sri Lanka relations last year. How do we overcome this challenge posed by COVID-19? At the root of India-Sri Lanka relations lie the ties between the two people of the two countries. Now, travel restrictions came in the way. Tourism industry of Sri Lanka has been hit. The year before that, Indian tourists outnumbered the tourists of any other nationality coming into Sri Lanka. So there were a number of challenges for us. And as an example, I would like to mention that the first virtual interaction which our Prime Minister had in the neighborhood was with Sri Lanka last year in September. The virtual bilateral summit between the Honorable Prime Minister of Sri Lanka and our Prime Minister set the tone. And taking a cue from that, we arranged bilateral interactions in virtual mode in a number of areas, whether it is business, whether it is official interactions. And it is no exception, because in many other spheres also in India, as we know, the video conferences or virtual meetings sort of stepped in to substitute for the physical interactions, given the restrictions internally imposed by in Sri Lanka, in India, everywhere in the world. So one aspect is that we tried to keep the momentum going quite successfully by having not only the leadership level interaction virtually, but others also. When it came to capacity building, you know that Indian ITEC program had been supplemented with e-ITEC program, the electronic virtual equivalent of it. So people who could not go to India for training, they undertook that training virtually. Also, COVID-related training was imparted virtually from India. So we supplemented the physical interaction or the lack of it with virtual interaction as much as we could.
Yeah, interaction. Interaction on the digital front, it certainly helped tie over the physical interaction. It was replaced by the digital mode. My next question would be, like, commercial and economic ties between countries took a hit in most cases during COVID-19. So what are your thoughts on the current state of economic and commercial interactions between India and Sri Lanka?
Yeah, you see, the economic cooperation between the two countries has been very important for both of us. India has been Sri Lanka's biggest trade partner for a number of years. We are among the topmost investors, and India is also among the top destination of Sri Lanka's exports. Over the years, the trade has become more favorable to Sri Lanka. Now, last year, given the COVID-related difficulties, the global trade as a whole took a hit. India-Sri Lanka trade was also no exception. But in addition, what we saw was that given the economic hardships here and the COVID-related difficulties, at the macroeconomic level also they had impact. So therefore, the government of Sri Lanka brought in certain COVID-related economic measures, which resulted into temporary restrictions on a number of imports into Sri Lanka. They were not India specific. However, they impacted some of the major imports from India. But I must say that with the cooperation of the government of Sri Lanka and the sensitivity to our concerns at the very highest levels also, we were able to address some of these measures, and we found ways to continue our exports to Sri Lanka in critical factors such as cement, sugar, and a number of others. And we remain engaged with the government of Sri Lanka to address similar aspects in other areas of trade. So trade is one. In terms of investment, I would like to mention very proudly that even at the height of the pandemic last year, it is an Indian private investor which has come into Sri Lanka and set up a global development center in software. I'm speaking of the HCL Technologies, whose development center in Sri Lanka was inaugurated virtually, of course, last year by the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa himself. The Global Development Center is not a back office. It is a development center and wishes to use and train and build capacity in the Sri Lankan human resources. They are top class, and they are going to use them to develop the programs for different clients all over the world. Now, that's a very heartening development. So these are one of few examples how we have tried to cater to the challenges, address the challenges posed by the COVID in the economic and commercial sphere. Of course, there are a number of projects, the big ticket investment projects, which are government to government, where we expect expeditious progress in line with the commitment at the leadership level. And we remain engaged with the government of Sri Lanka to see quick implementation of many of them.
Sir, being very close neighbors, are there any connectivity projects being envisaged?
Oh yes, a number of them. You see, as I mentioned, the people-to-people ties between the two countries are the lifeblood. They are the lifeblood of our relations, not from now, from the times immemorial. Even before Buddha sent his son Mahinda and his daughter Sanghamitra to Sri Lanka, King Ashoka, Emperor Ashoka sent his son and daughter to Sri Lanka. Even before that, there has been very intensive interaction between the people of the two countries, and it has continued in every sphere. So connectivity helps not only sustain the people-to-people ties, but also helps revitalize, enrich our cultures, our economy, and our interaction in every sphere. So we are looking at, of course, when the situation permits, we are looking to enhance our engagement with Sri Lanka in civil aviation. We are looking to resume the Palale-Chennai, that is a Jaffna-Chennai flight, which had started before COVID pandemic came last year and imposed the restrictions. We are also looking to cooperate with government of Sri Lanka in the expansion of the Palale airport, which can result into benefits to both India and Sri Lanka, because both the countries can be easily connected for the exchange of goods directly rather than having to be routed through elsewhere, either in India or in Sri Lanka. We are also looking at the possibility of starting ferry service between Kanke Santhurai in Sri Lanka, which is in the north near Jaffna, and Karaikal in India. Work has been done on this, and we expect progress in this regard as well. We are also restoring, with the cooperation of government of Sri Lanka, there is an India-aided project to restore the harbour at Kanke Santhurai, which will allow for both goods and passenger ferries to come and enhance the connectivity links. So in brief, there are a number of projects. There have been in the past the Talai Manar and Dhanush Kodi ferry also. So there are a number of areas, number of specific proposals and projects on which we are engaged with the government of Sri Lanka. I must also mention that there has been request from the government of Sri Lanka to enhance the flight connections for the Buddhist pilgrims going to India every year. Now, of course, last year there were not many of them around the year because of the COVID restrictions, and this year also we are going to work on this as much as the situation permits. The Kushinagar International Airport, which the Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji he has guided the efforts to make it an international airport. There also the first international flight to come, it has been agreed, will be from Sri Lanka, and we are working closely with the government of Sri Lanka to put this additional link in the connectivity basket between the two countries.
As a development partner, we have almost contributed USD 3.5 billion till date as a development for assistance programs in Sri Lanka. Would you like to comment on this?
So, Amey, I think your question about the development cooperation between India and Sri Lanka is an extremely important one. Like everywhere else in the world, India's development cooperation with Sri Lanka is based on fundamental principles that it answers the requirements of the government of and the people of the country, and it is essentially demand driven. We do not impose any agenda or any projects from our side, and we are completely transparent in regard to these projects. Two projects which have been, I just give you one example because there are two examples, because although there are a number of those projects which we have taken island wide, all over the island in Sri Lanka, north, south, east, west, in all the 9 provinces, in all the 25 districts of Sri Lanka, there are projects conducted with the government of India assistance. But two projects I would like to mention. One is the housing, where we have cooperated with the government of Sri Lanka in constructing 60,000 houses. We will be undertaking the 4th phase of this scheme, comprising 10,000 houses. The other one is the ambulance service called the Suvas area or 1990, the numbers that people dial here to get those ambulances. Not only in the normal times, but especially in the COVID times, these ambulances have helped save precious human lives. And I must tell you, it's so touching to receive from the government, not only government, but the common people, ordinary people, letters of thanks and appreciation. And I must also mention that very recently we have received additional requests for more such ambulances from the government of Sri Lanka. So these are very heartening aspects. We are going to add online education or education in general, skills development for employment, energy, where it can be a mix of grant, LOC projects, as well as commercial projects, and a number of other areas such as in agriculture, water and sanitation, where India has very good expertise to offer. You will perhaps hear more about this in the near future.
Sir, you did mention about connectivity to the Buddhist circuits in Sri Lanka. Buddhism is a very invaluable gift which India gave to Sri Lanka, and it still continues to be a cornerstone of these bilateral relations. Prime Minister Modi announced a grant of USD 15 million last year. What are some of the other steps that are being taken to strengthen this partnership?
Well, that's a very, very important question, Amaya, because as you yourself said, Buddhism forms a very strong tie between the two countries. And it's a gift from India, not only to Sri Lanka, but to the entire world. Buddha's message is for everyone. In the recent times, we have cooperated in connecting more between the Buddhist institutions of the two countries. So first focus is on enhancing exchanges for students, for monks, for higher Buddhist studies and related studies, for example, in Pali and Sanskrit. There are well-known institutions in India as well as in Sri Lanka, and there is a tremendous scope for more cooperation, deeper cooperation in Buddhist studies and related areas and research in them. The second is reinforcing, according to the requirement of the government of Sri Lanka, some of the infrastructure related to Buddhism over here, which includes monasteries, facilities for nuns, young monks, supplementing their religious education with skills such as in English and computer education, and also archaeology and museum. The displays and assisting in some of those areas where we have a lot to share in terms of archaeological commonalities and commonality of the heritage. The third area is enhancing exchanges between the people, ordinary people. As I mentioned earlier, there are a number of pilgrims. So some of these could be utilized to, some of the fund could be utilized to enhance the facilities for the pilgrims and promoting exchanges at the people's level. So we are in touch with the government of Sri Lanka, and there are a number of exciting ideas on projects, specific projects under this fund. And we are working with the government of Sri Lanka.
Excellency, it seems that this is in line with our Prime Minister Modi's dream project of connecting to Buddhist circuits, not Sri Lanka, but vis-a-vis India with even other countries also. It has been absolutely a dream project,
Absolutely. There is much in common in the Buddhist world. And as I said, the message of Buddha is for the entire world. Prime Minister Sri Modi came to Sri Lanka. He visited Sri Lanka 4 years ago in 2017 on the UN Vesak Day, and he went to the Gangaramaya temple. Incidentally, the same temple last week organized a very special prayer in which all the senior monks of Sri Lanka had come together from many sects and many parts, especially for the COVID-related difficulties that the world is facing, that India is facing, Sri Lanka is facing also. So those links are very warmly remembered by the people of Sri Lanka. So Prime Minister Modi's lead in this regard has been very warmly acknowledged in Sri Lanka. And India's role in the Buddhist world is also not only in creating more people-to-people ties, but also in leading Buddhist studies and more research and connecting the scholarly domain, the academics also in this sphere is also greatly appreciated and much sought after.
Sir, Sri Lanka witnessed a number of special prayers and ceremonies for the well-being of people of India during this recent wave. And India is going through this very brutal second wave of COVID-19. This be construed as a reflection of strong people-to-people contact.
It is a reflection, obviously, of very strong people-to-people relations, and I and my colleagues in the High Commission have received numerous messages, in fact, in hundreds, perhaps, if not more, from common people, saying that even in Sinhala or in Tamil or in English, handwritten messages on emails, or some people have even written in the newspapers that they have families across in India and they have been to India, they have studied in India, or they went to Sarnath or Bodh Gaya. And when the people of India are undergoing these difficulties, they feel empathy, they feel solidarity, they have expressed support. So it is very spontaneous. This expression of solidarity all across Sri Lanka with India cuts across sections of the society. It is not only, of course, Sri Lanka is has the majority of the population which follows Sinhala, which is Sinhala and which follows Buddhist religion. But in churches, there have been special masses and prayers. In temples, in the north, in Colombo, and many other places, there have been special prayers, special yagyas, homas performed, and we have been sent because many of these, Sri Lanka itself also has now a very strong COVID wave. And so because of that situation, many of these meetings are not physical. So people have joined virtually. We have been requested to join virtually. Even last week, as I mentioned, the famous Gangaramaya temple had a very high profile presence of senior clergy. There are others, they are going every day. Common people are reciting, like we have Ramayana and Hanuman Chalisa and other things. So in Buddhism, there are these suttas. Ratan Sutta is associated with Buddha's life, where Gautam Buddha, after he became Buddha the Enlightened, he visited a particular place near Vaishali where there was an epidemic raging, and he recited this Ratan Sutta for 7 days, and the epidemic is believed to have vanished. That Ratan Sutta is now being recited by people not for 7 days, but for 14 days, voluntarily. 7 days for India, 7 days for Sri Lanka. So that is the nature. Many of our Sri Lankan friends, our Sri Lankan brothers and sisters have spontaneously felt, and there has been a genuine outpouring of solidarity and support and prayers and good wishes for the people of India.
Speaking of, Colombo Security Conclave, which was established during NSA Ajit Doval's visit to Sri Lanka towards the end of last year. Is this a sign of deepening engagement between the two countries in security cooperation? And what are the other broad parameters guiding this dimension?
I must thank you, Amir, for bringing up this question, because when I was answering your first question about the challenges posed by COVID-19, I did not mention, I mentioned many virtual interactions, but I did not mention two very important physical interactions, two visits which had taken place. One was by a national security advisor, as you mentioned correctly, last year in November, and the other was by the External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar. Early in January this year. In fact, that was his first foreign visit this year to any country. So these were two very important interactions which set the tone for us for working in the diplomatic and political and security domain, among other areas. Coming back to the visit of the National Security Advisor, it was basically in the context of the fourth trilateral meeting of the National Security Advisors of Maldives, Sri Lanka, and India, which was taking place after 6 years, after a gap of 6 years. So that itself is a mechanism which has played a very important role a few years ago in ensuring that the challenges related to the security domain and which are shared and common among these three countries are adequately addressed through our multilateral, trilateral cooperation. There was an acute need, particularly after the Easter Sunday attack in 2019, to reinvigorate that cooperation. And while that was taking place, it was important for the national security advisors of the three countries to meet also. So there are many important decisions have been taken in that three meeting. One is to expand the membership of that conclave and to sort of give it a little more structure and include in it both security related cooperation and in a number of areas. For example, not only in countering terrorism and radicalism, but also fighting effectively the menace of drug trafficking, terrorist financing, and organized crime, which ultimately go into feeding terrorism. Unfortunately, our region is no stranger to that challenge. But what is new is that all the three countries, Maldives, India, and Sri Lanka, decided to reinforce these efforts and create a structure which will take this interaction forward in a very expeditious manner. So apart from the multilateral aspect, the visit also gave an opportunity, a very good and useful opportunity to the leadership engagement, and the National Security Advisor had very productive meetings with the Honorable President and Honorable Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, and a number of important aspects of the relationship in the security and political domain, as well as in other areas were addressed. And those conversations in many ways were taken forward during the visit of Dr. Jaishankar. So these two visits have provided a very firm ground, and they have also etched out the agenda for our interaction for the rest of this year and the time to come.
Sir, several commentaries suggest that Sri Lanka is getting closer to China. This relationship is marked by frequent high-level visits, support in multilateral forums, etc. Is India worried about these developments?
Well, not at all. Brief answer will be not at all. But if I were to take a minute or two in explaining to you why we are and we cannot be worried and we should not be worried, I would say that one has to look at the geography and the history. As I have mentioned, India-Sri Lanka ties are millennia old. They are very close. They are based on people-to-people connectivity and connections and links, which predate even recorded history. Geographically, we sit across the Palk Strait. Our ancestors have traded regularly. We continue to do that even today. I mentioned in the earlier part of our conversation the strength of India-Sri Lanka trade and investment partnership, the prospects that lie there, the potential which lie there. So what is the reason for this close India and Sri Lanka relationship? It is the geography, it is the history, it is the people. And when we look at the people, what are these people? These people are followers of Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, many languages, many cultures. So this diversity in India and Sri Lanka underpins the democracy in India and Sri Lanka respectively. And then the respective democracy reinforces that diversity. So our two countries breed diversity, breed democracy. We are based, our cultures, our values bind us from time immemorial. And in the contemporary world, we are two proud democracies which celebrate diversity. We have to understand that this is the foundation of the strong relationship and the logic behind the strong relationship, which is immutable even in today's world between India and Sri Lanka. If we come to the specifics, I mentioned about the development partnership. In fact, India is the largest development partner of Sri Lanka, and I, at the risk of repetition, I would say that our projects here answer, as I said, directly the requirement of the people, and they answer their requirements. They are they are based on their requirements and their needs, the people of Sri Lanka, the government of Sri Lanka. And we respond to their requests, and we are completely transparent about it, as I mentioned earlier. Now, there is one more thing which I would like to say, that we hear a lot about what you mentioned, but I would say, as a close friend and neighbor of Sri Lanka, that Sri Lanka has, of course, like any other country, number of options for addressing its requirements, for its conducting its foreign relations, structuring its foreign relations, and its economic partnerships. It is for the government and the people of Sri Lanka to decide which options they wish to pursue. On our part, we of course will continue to believe and work for strengthening the partnership between India and Sri Lanka in all spheres, especially economic partnership, security, people-to-people ties, knowing that our future, our destiny is interlinked.
Sir, meetings of foreign ministers of BIMSTEC members took place last month. As a BIMSTEC summit is awaited, what will be the future nature of engagements between India and Sri Lanka in such regional groups?
Well, you are very right. The BIMSTEC foreign ministers had a virtual meeting a few weeks ago, and there are a number of outcomes of that in terms of further steps, and also the possibility of a summit later on to be hosted, to be chaired by Sri Lanka, at which they will pass on the chairmanship to the next member, which I think will be Thailand. Now, BIMSTEC has got a very strong regional agenda. At the bottom, at the foundation of it, for India and Sri Lanka, if I speak because I represent India and Sri Lanka, we both are Indian Ocean countries. We both have a maritime history. We both have interest in the navigation, in securing the freedom of navigation, freedom and security of the maritime trade, openness of seas, and upholding all the principles on all the international norms which underpin the freedom of navigation and the open seas, etc. So I think for Sri Lanka, the maritime environment is extremely important. And one example which I would give you, not in the regional context, but of course, there have been number of occasions where India and Sri Lanka have collaborated closely, whether it is interdicting drug trafficking on the high seas. There have been many large interdictions and catches. But MT New Diamond, the oil tanker which had caught fire last year in September, the cooperation between Indian Coast Guard and navies with their Sri Lankan counterpart was instrumental in putting out the fire and arresting any further damage and preventing a big possible natural disaster due to oil spill. So these are the type of cooperations on which we are working bilaterally with Sri Lanka, but also many of these go into the regional vectors. So as an ocean country, as a maritime country, as a South Asian partner of India, and on its own, I think the preservation of the maritime freedom and security, as well as benefiting from the maritime environment around Sri Lanka, makes it very, very interesting and very productive for both India and Sri Lanka to further develop their cooperation, not only bilaterally, but in the regional fora like BIMSTEC. So therefore, the importance of BIMSTEC for India and Sri Lanka is even, I would say it is even more, and it has additional dimensions, and we will continue to work in this regard through capacity building, through specific projects, exercises, and transfer of knowledge, and also gaining and sharing from each other.
Sir, one very important question which troubles both the countries is the fisherman issue. There have been a lot of incidents where both sides, fishermen, they have been caught, they have been prosecuted. So, are both the countries working on this to find any solution?
That's a very important question. It's a humanitarian matter, Ame, as you know, with the shared maritime history and so close to each other. these type of matters obviously need a humanitarian approach. And this is what we have been working with the government of Sri Lanka. I'm very happy to tell you and your viewers that after a long gap again, the meeting of the joint working group on the fisheries took place virtually last December, actually. And it reached many important outcomes. One of it, of course, is to continue to address the situation as a humanitarian matter. I'm happy to tell you that we work very closely with the government of Sri Lanka for release of fishermen and their humanitarian treatment for those who inadvertently stray across the international maritime boundary line. There are a number of agreements and arrangements between the two countries on how to deal with such situations, no use of force and immediate release, etc. And I'm very happy to say that there is no fisherman currently with the government of Sri Lanka, so far as we know. And whenever they sort of such situations arise, we work very closely with the Sri Lankan Coast Guard, navies, and government and other authorities to make sure that they are treated well. We gain consular access very quickly and look after the well-being of our citizens till the time they are able to go back. There is another related question of their boats. A number of them have been released in the past. And when the Honorable President of Sri Lanka had visited India, there was an understanding that those of them which are salvageable, which can be made seaworthy, they can be released. And we are working with the government of Sri Lanka and the government of Tamil Nadu to take that process forward. Because of COVID, teams from government of Tamil Nadu have not been able to visit. But once they visit, the further process for repairing or taking away some of the salvageable boats and some of them which cannot be salvaged and have to be dealt with in a different manner. Those modalities can be finalized. If the teams cannot visit for some more time, we will try and arrange this interaction virtually and take this forward. In brief, we are quite satisfied in which this complicated aspect has been dealt with by both the governments, by the authorities, and we will look forward to continue our cooperation with the government of Sri Lanka at all levels so that this matter continues to be dealt with in a humanitarian manner, which is the best way to address these type of matters.
That brings me to the end of this program. High Commissioner Gopal Baglay, you shared array of information and gave insights into India-Sri Lanka bilateral relations, emerging new investment opportunities, improving people-to-people contact, security cooperation. So thank you very much, High Commissioner Gopal Baglay, on joining this very special program. This is Amay Sathe signing off from New Delhi for sarkaritel.com and diplomacyindia.com. Thank you very much.